Warm greetings to you as you join us on today's episode of Tax Matters. My name is Olumuyiwa Matuluko, and with me on today's episode is Radiant Chiamaka.
Hello, viewers.
We guess that Happy New Year is still in order for very many more days and weeks to come. And so permit us to seize this opportunity to wish you all a resoundingly successful 2018. Of course, this is episode number 2 of Tax Matters in the year 2018. Last week, we came to you with an episode on which VATS was the focus. Yes, the Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme is still trending.
6 months are gone, 3 months to go.
What taxes are covered by VATS? All taxes. And that is why the federal and state tax authorities are collaborating on VATS.
So when you come out to declare under VATS, if the taxes being declared are personal income tax, you file with the State Internal Revenue Service.
And when they are corporate taxes, you file with the Federal Inland Revenue Service. And talking about taxes, is it true that we have too many taxes or tax types in Nigeria? Or to put it more bluntly, does Nigeria have multiplicity of taxes? This was the issue critically examined by Professor Abiola Sani, Lagos State Professor of Tax and Fiscal Matters at the University of Lagos, at a public lecture delivered on Tuesday, the 20th of November 2017. The occasion was the very first annual lecture of the endowment with the title Policy, Legal and Administrative Imperatives Towards Eradicating Multiplicity of Taxes in Lagos State. We brought you the first installment of that offering in an episode of Tax Matters in the middle of December 2017. And we did promise to bring you the concluding part later on. That is the promise we are keeping today. But before then, this backgrounder. Nigeria is divided into 36 states, which are in turn divided into 774 local governments. As the law permits today, the federal government is empowered to collect a total of 9 taxes, while the states are empowered to collect a total of 25 taxes, charges, levies, and fines. The local governments, on their own part, are empowered by law to collect a total of 21 taxes, charges, levies, and fines. In part 1 of this offering, we shared with you Professor Soni's tracing of the origin of the labeling of Nigeria as abhorring multiple taxes as the promulgation of Act No. 21 of 1998, otherwise known as Taxes and Levies, Approved List for Collection, now known as Cap T2, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004. Professor Soni also drew a distinction between taxes and levies.
I looked at taxes and levies. Except in Nigeria, I don't think there's anywhere where the two words will normally go together. But in Nigeria, you can hardly talk about one without the other. So, do they mean the same thing? Do they mean different things? If they mean the same thing, why are we describing the same thing in 2 different ways? And I looked at it and I gave a definition, a proper definition of tax, which tallies with what the definition is the revised national tax policy. And here we refer to taxes as all compulsory payments to government without any direct benefit to the payer, irrespective of the name that it is called. We should use the word tax only for payments for which there is no direct benefit. Then what about levy? Levies, the meaning is wider in the sense that it also includes taxes. Because if you look at the word levy as a verb and also as a noun, it means any payment. So if you are talking about any compulsory payment to government, whether there is a direct benefit or not, it is appropriate to use the word levy. But there are so many levies for which you can see a direct link between the payment and also certain services that are being conferred on the payer. When you pay for permit to erect a building, that is a levy, it's not a tax. When you pay for permit in order to have a license for your car. There are so many things you have to seek government approval for in order for you to proceed. The bright line rule is if there is a direct link between the payment and also certain services, it is a levy and not a tax.
Professor Sonny went on to highlight some of the manifestations of the multiplicity of taxes.
I look at how the National Tax Policy 2012 defined this phenomenon. And that document defined multiplicity of taxes only in terms of its manifestation at the state and local government level. And this gave a false impression that there are no multiplicity of taxes at the federal level, which I disagree with. Then I've decided to look at multiplicity of taxes holistically in a broader way, because most of the interventions have been aimed at addressing some part of the manifestations and not everything. So from the general usages by stakeholders, multiplicity of taxes can manifest in at least 4 ways. The first one refers to unlawful compulsory payments being collected by states and local governments without appropriate legal backing through intimidation and harassment. In those circumstances, you don't really have a choice. Those are not taxes, but they manifest because the machinery for collection at that level either does not exist or is very, very weak. Second, multiplicity of taxes refers to cases in which various government agencies charge exorbitant amount for licenses, permits, ostensibly in the need to generate more revenue. So there are so many things that people have been used to enjoying in the past in accessing government services, which they can no longer patronize today because they will cause harm and neglect. The effect is more on those who are running businesses. Third, it refers to the situation where the same level of government imposes 2 or more taxes on the same tax base. A good example here is a multi-layer levels of taxes under companies income tax, tertiary education tax, information technology tax, and so on and so forth. This manifests almost exclusively at the federal level. So the first layer of taxation of income of companies in Nigeria is a tax of 30% of the net profit. The second layer is a tax of 2% of the accessible profit under tertiary education trust fund. Then the third layer is information technology tax of 1% of the gross profit of certain companies. I believe that the emerging tax reform in Nigeria will find a way to streamline these 3 or more taxes into one, and then balance the competing interest in order to improve its ranking on the ease of paying taxes index. Because on this score alone, the outside world will look at us and say, what is happening here? If you want to mark up the company's income tax, you can as well do it, and then earmark the revenue from it for these other purposes. Because some of these special taxes have a way of actually motivating the introduction of more. And that is why it is bad policy to have special taxes at all. Then the fourth refers to the situation where a taxpayer is faced with demands from 2 or more different levels of government, either for the same or similar taxes. A good example here is the administration of value-added tax and also the hotel occupancy and restaurant consumption tax simultaneously. Multiplicity of taxes manifests in this manner only in Lagos State and other states that have followed the Lagos model. I also believe that emerging tax reform in Lagos State will find a way to streamline these two taxes and then balance the competing interests. Viewed from these broad perspectives, it can be seen that none of the three levels of government is free from blame. The danger in construing multiplicity of taxes narrowly is that intervention will not be broad-based. And that is why we are saying, let's look at all this together holistically and see the appropriate responses for each of them.
Professor Sonny also examined some recent federal and state interventions aimed at curbing the menace.
Finally, because of the persistent nature of this problem, in 2015, JTB also, in alliance with the National Council of States, initiated another reform. And they said the Minister of Finance should amend the schedule to the Taxes and Levies Approved for Collection Act. And stakeholders were thinking that that will actually either phase out that law or reduce significantly the number of taxes on it. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that amendment increased the number of levies, the items on that law from 39 to 55. That didn't happen under the watch of Mrs. Kemi Adeosun. But she has inherited the problem, and I have some recommendations on how this can be resolved.
It's a new dawn in Nigeria, and the mantra is change. The wind of change is blowing all over Nigeria and beckons to you. One sure way to respond is to perform your civic duty, pay your tax. With taxes, government generates revenue to fulfill its electoral promises, ensure regular power supply, provide good security, standard education, medical care, through total change. Individuals and corporations enjoy specific benefits, rights and privileges for paying taxes and avoid the consequences and penalties of not paying. Oil revenue is no longer sufficient to bring desired change, but your tax can. It pays to pay your tax. A message from the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we can see that if we rely on the fact that there are now 55 payment items in Nigeria, we can predict what the outcome of the next survey on ease of paying taxes in Nigeria might be. So if we are serious and want to build on the success on the improvement in the area of ease of doing business survey, then we need to do something relating to this. The federal government should take both steps to streamline the company's income tax, the tertiary education tax, and the information technology tax into one. The police had come at a time to also say, we need security tax. And what could be more justifiable? Because that's the primary reason for the state. So we need to do something relating to this and ensure that these agencies are sufficiently funded in order to continue to do their intervention. I know what State Fund is doing in this school, and I will want State Fund to do more. And State Fund does not necessarily have to do it by imposing a separate tax. It's either we mark up the existing one or we allocate sufficient budget for State Fund. When we had PTF, we didn't have PTF tax. Government looked for ways and means to provide funds in order to do all those interventions. Federal government, with due respect, should also come to terms with the fact that an important aspect of VAT on intrastate supply of goods and services is essentially within the powers of the state. It is therefore ultra-vires the federal government to continue to impose tax and collect VAT on intrastate supply of goods and services. Hence, the federal government should yield the power to administer VAT on intrastate supplies to states. As More states introduced their consumption tax along with VAT, following the Lagos model, because most of the states will follow Lagos. The problem of multiplicity of taxes will worsen. States who desire to continue with federally administered tax should be able to work out modalities for such an arrangement and take advantage of the new fiscal cooperation between the federal and the state. But states like Lagos State and others who may want to stand alone should have the right and the liberty to do so. Lagos State should internally resolve the multiplicity of taxes arising from the concurrent administration of VAT and its consumption tax. It should take an informed decision whether to stay with VAT or go the whole hog in implementing the consumption tax. If it chooses the latter, which to me is a better option, the base of consumption tax should be widened beyond tourism and hospitality sector. This will require an amendment of the existing law. The Lagos State should urgently take steps to send 4 bills to the National Assembly repealing produce sales tax law, trade cattle control and tax law, sales tax law, and neighborhood improvement charge law, which are currently on its laws. And when the opportunity to revise the laws of Lagos State also presents itself, the stamp duties law should simply be omitted because it is a federal statute. Then government should recognize and make its tax authority the prime revenue agency and discourage the present practice whereby virtually all the MDAs seem to be competing for imaginary revenue generation trophy, which sometimes results in occasional interagency distortion of the system. There should be a deliberate policy to enable the critical mass of the people, of the public, to access the various services being provided by the MDAs. The main objective of government intervention in perfection of land, title to land, for example, obtaining governor's consent, obtaining license and permit for various items is for regulation, that is standard setting and control of behavior, and not revenue generation. Accordingly, the amount of fees chargeable by MDAs should not impose unnecessary burden on the people. Ladies and gentlemen, I recommend the provisions of Utilities Charges Commission Act should be extended to levies at the federal and the state level. I was happy to see this law. In those days, when most of the utilities were provided by government, either rail, telephone, and transportation by air and by sea, this law sought to constrain the power of the agencies to fix fees. The fix must be approved. Even NNPC, NIPOST, you can't just wake up tomorrow and say, because you want to generate revenue for all these parastatals and increase their fees. So I recommend the same thing for Lagos State so that they can take on board all the fees chargeable by the various agencies. And we also have to ensure that some agencies which may not have revenue potential, so to speak, are also well funded. Now, what revenue will INEC at the federal level or LASEC generate? Because if they say people should pay for voters' card, who is going to collect? Who is going to collect? The National Assembly should repeal Cap T2, a statute which seeks to clarify taxes collectible has ended up befuddling the issues. Besides the fact that Section 1.1 and Section 2.1, which are the key provisions on which the legislation rests, are patently inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution, the statute, in my own view, has outlived its usefulness. Justice Kanyip had echoed the same prescription in one of his papers where he said, and I quote, "The thing to do is for Decree 21 of 1998 to be repealed, not because it is a bad law, but because in certain respects it cannot stand the constitutional test under 1999 Constitution. In fact, in terms of purpose, the decree is well intended. The same is recommended for Lagos State with regards to Cap L 91. Nothing will be lost, in my view, if these statutes are repealed, since the mischief which they sought to cure could be better addressed through some other means, some of which I've mentioned in this paper. In the short run, each local government or local government development areas should establish a special administrative unit to regularly monitor occurrences or complaints about illegal extortion. We can take a cue from a recent Lagos intervention relating to land grabbing. If every local government has a functional unit where there is a hotline that you can call and report, I think something can be done eventually. Enduring solution to the problem of multiplicity of taxes at local governments will require a policy shift on how to finance local governments. And I made suggestions on how local governments should be repositioned in order to make them play the vibrant roles that the drafters of the 1999 Constitution envisaged for them. Because Nigeria is the only federal constitution that has provisions on local government. This may not be the best model, but they wanted local government to do certain irreducible minimum of services. And they provided ways and means for them to be financed. But most of the ways and means have been compromised. Most of the local governments in various states now complain that they do not have access to revenue. If we continue to deny them access, they will do all sorts. In fact, we have not seen anything. So I come to the conclusion. It is clear, ladies and gentlemen, that all levels of government are complicit in feeding this problem through wrong policy choices in revenue generations by the MDAs. The former practice of buck passing, where the federal blames the state and the state blames the local government, is no longer tenable. It behoves on each level of government to accept responsibility and take some of the recommendations touching on them in this lecture seriously. We have considered the various attempts, noble attempts indeed, made in the past to address the problem. And I use this opportunity to acknowledge the role of JTB in this regard. Why we highlighted JTB Noble's effort through federal legislation to do certain things that are better addressed at the state level. All the problems associated with the phenomenon, which has defied solution for almost 3 decades, cannot be exhaustively addressed in a 1-hour presentation. I do hope that my presentation will set a new tone for the engagement by stakeholders. With every level of government playing its part, I'm hopeful that multiplicity of taxes will soon be a thing of the past in Lagos State and in Nigeria.
There you are. Where do you stand on this matter of multiplicity of taxes in Nigeria? Is it real or is it a myth? If it is real, if it exists, what are your recommendations towards containing this menace? Or do you believe that Professor Sonny has profiled enough solutions? Tweet us, like us on Facebook, send text messages to us, send us emails, call us, let us know where you stand. We want to thank you most sincerely for finding time to watch today's episode of Tax Matters. From Chiamaka.
Thank you for watching and have a beautiful 2018.
Thank you for watching.